Have you ever had someone steal something so precious from you that it changed the entire trajectory of your life? I'm Callie Morgan, and what happened to me at Branford and Hillman will make your blood boil. Picture this: 14 years of dedication, late nights, missed family dinners, all building toward one moment. The VP of Strategy role, my role. The $7 million promotion I'd earned through blood, sweat, and pure determination. Then she walked in. Tinsley Ray. All blonde ambition and calculated charm. Within 3 months, she'd not only stolen my promotion but had done it in the most degrading way possible. And the worst part? I discovered exactly how she'd managed it on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked. "Callie, there's something you need to see." Her face was pale, hands trembling as she handed me a printed email. My eyes scanned the corporate announcement, and my world shattered. Tinsley Ray had been promoted to VP of Strategy, effective immediately. But that wasn't the part that broke me. What destroyed me was learning how she'd secured it. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. I started at Branford and Hillman fresh out of graduate school, bright-eyed and naive. Logistics wasn't glamorous, but I had a gift for seeing patterns others missed. While my colleagues networked at happy hours, I stayed late analyzing supply chain inefficiencies. While they played office politics, I delivered results. Year after year, I climbed the ladder the right way. No shortcuts, no compromises, no sleeping my way to the top. I earned every promotion through merit alone. My track record spoke for itself. Increased efficiency by 40%, saved the company millions in operational costs, and mentored dozens of junior employees who now hold leadership positions themselves. By year 10, I was Senior Director of Operations. By year 12, I was essentially running strategy without the title. My boss, former VP of Strategy Jerome Blackwell, had promised me during my last performance review that the position would be mine when he retired. "Callie," he'd said, leaning back in his leather chair, "you've more than earned this. The board knows it, I know it, and when I announce my retirement next quarter, you'll step right into my shoes." The board had postponed Jerome's transition once before due to restructuring, but I didn't mind waiting. Those words had sustained me through another grueling year. But Jerome's retirement announcement came with a shocking twist that nobody saw coming. Tinsley Ray arrived on a Monday morning in September like a hurricane in designer heels. The company had hired her as a strategic marketing consultant, with vague promises about brand modernization and innovative market positioning. What I didn't know then was that she was quietly being fast-tracked for a permanent executive role. I should have seen the red flags immediately. She was everything I wasn't. Loud where I was thoughtful, flashy where I was professional, social media savvy where I preferred substance over style. During her first company meeting, she threw around buzzwords like synergy and disruption, while presenting slides that looked pretty but said nothing. "We need to revolutionize our market approach," she declared, gesturing dramatically at charts that any first-year business student could have created. "Think outside the paradigm box and leverage our core competencies for maximum stakeholder engagement." I watched our executives nod along, mesmerized by her confidence. It was like watching a masterclass in corporate theater. What bothered me wasn't her presentation style, it was how quickly she'd gained access to senior leadership, especially Vice President Mitch Langford. Mitch had always been professional with me, never inappropriate, always respectful. But with Tinsley, something was different. The way he lingered after her presentations, the private meetings that appeared on his calendar, the sudden strategy sessions that excluded the actual strategy team. I told myself I was being paranoid. But paranoia, I would soon learn, can sometimes be survival instinct. 3 weeks after Tinsley's arrival, Jerome called me into his office for what I assumed would be transition planning. Instead, he delivered news that knocked the wind out of me. "Callie, there's been a change of plans," he said, unable to meet my eyes. The board has decided to go in a different direction for the VP position. They want someone with fresh perspectives. Fresh perspectives. Code for young, attractive, and willing to play games I'd never learned. I felt the room spinning as he continued talking about evolving leadership paradigms, but his voice carried the hollow tone of someone repeating corporate talking points he didn't believe. His hands fidgeted with his pen, a tell I'd noticed whenever he delivered bad news he couldn't justify. 14 years of dedication, and they were throwing me aside for someone who'd been there 3 weeks. Who's getting the position? I managed to ask, though I already knew the answer. Tinsley Ray will be taking over as VP of Strategy. She's bringing innovative approaches that align with our future vision. Jerome's voice carried the hollow tone of someone repeating corporate talking points he didn't believe. I excused myself professionally, walked calmly to the bathroom, and spent 10 minutes crying in a locked stall. But as the tears subsided, something else emerged, a cold, calculating anger that would drive everything that came next. When I returned to my desk, my assistant was waiting with concerned eyes. "How did it go?" she asked. "Perfectly," I lied, already formulating my next move. Because if they thought I'd accept this betrayal quietly, they were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. If you're enjoying this story of corporate betrayal and revenge, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear about standing up for what's right. Trust me, this is just the beginning. 2 weeks after the announcement, I was working late again, partly from habit, partly because going home meant confronting the reality of my shattered career plans. The office was nearly empty when I heard voices echoing from the executive conference room. Familiar voices. I shouldn't have listened. Professional ethics demanded I walk away. But something about their tone, intimate, conspiratorial, made me pause by the partially open door. "Can't believe how easy this was," Tinsley's voice carried clearly down the hallway. "I told you that weekend in Palm Springs would pay off." My blood froze. Palm Springs. Mitch had taken a strategic planning retreat there the month before. Tinsley had coincidentally been at a marketing conference in the same city, same weekend. "You were incredible," Mitch's voice was lower, more careful. "But we need to be smarter about appearances now. People are already talking." "Let them talk," Tinsley laughed. "What can they prove? Besides, I delivered exactly what I promised. The promotion is mine, and you got what you wanted too." I nearly dropped my phone when I heard her laugh again, the sound echoing down the hallway like nails on glass. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. The pieces were falling into place, her sudden hire, the private meetings, the quick promotion, Mitch's unusual behavior. It wasn't just favoritism or bias. She had literally slept her way into my job. But knowing the truth and proving it were two very different things. And as I sat alone at my desk that night, I realized I had a choice: accept defeat or fight back with every weapon at my disposal. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of wine and let myself feel the full weight of my anger. But with the anger came clarity, and with clarity came memory. A memory from 3 years ago that would change everything. I'd been part of a committee tasked with updating our corporate conduct policies. It was tedious work that most people avoided, but I'd volunteered because I believed in creating fair workplace standards. During one particularly heated discussion about executive accountability, I'd pushed for specific language about relationships between superiors and subordinates. "We need clearer guidelines about conflicts of interest," I'd argued. "What happens when personal relationships influence professional decisions?" The legal team had initially resisted, calling it overreach, but I'd been persistent. Eventually, we'd crafted Section 9 of the Corporate Conduct Policy, a clause that I'd written almost word for word. Now, sitting in my apartment with policy documents spread across my coffee table, I found it again, executives engaging in undisclosed personal relationships resulting in measurable career benefit for a subordinate will be subject to internal review and disciplinary recommendation. I'd written this clause thinking about hypothetical future problems. I never imagined I'd become the victim it was designed to protect. But like many internal policies, it sat buried in binders most executives never touched, until now. The irony was bitter, but the opportunity was clear. However, a policy violation only mattered if someone with authority cared enough to enforce it. And that meant I needed more than suspicion, I needed evidence. Monday morning, I became a detective in my own workplace. Not in an obvious way, I was too smart for that. Instead, I leveraged my 14 years of institutional knowledge and the trust I'd built across departments. They didn't hand me files, of course. But after years of collaboration and trust, all it took were a few well-placed questions. From IT, I learned about VPN logins showing Mitch and Tinsley accessing company systems from the same IP address in Palm Springs. From accounting, I discovered that Tinsley's consulting contract had been processed with unusual speed, bypassing normal approval chains. From HR, I found out that her reference checks had been abbreviated, at Mitch's specific request. The pattern was clear, but I needed more. Corporate investigations required documentation, not just circumstantial evidence. So I started keeping a detailed log. Every interaction I witnessed, every meeting they attended together, every policy their behavior potentially violated. I also reached out to colleagues who'd worked with Tinsley on various projects. Carefully, professionally, I asked about her qualifications and experience. The picture that emerged was troubling. She was competent but not exceptional, certainly not VP level for a company our size. To be honest, confided one project manager over coffee, I was surprised by how quickly she advanced. Usually, people need to prove themselves over years, not weeks. I nodded sympathetically while internally cataloging another piece of evidence. But I was still missing the smoking gun, proof of the actual relationship that would make everything else relevant. That proof would come from an unexpected source. Sometimes the universe provides exactly what you need when you least expect it. Mine came in the form of Janet Osborne, a junior analyst who'd been assigned to support Tinsley's strategic initiatives. Janet was 24, brilliant, and possessed the kind of attention to detail that made her invaluable. She approached me after a department meeting, glancing around nervously before speaking. "Callie, can I ask you something confidentially?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. We found a private corner, and Janet's story tumbled out. She'd been tasked with managing Tinsley's calendar and travel arrangements. In doing so, she'd noticed irregularities that troubled her professional conscience. Her Palm Springs trip wasn't booked through corporate travel, Janet explained. She paid personally, then submitted an expense report claiming it was a marketing conference. But I couldn't find any record of a conference that weekend. More damaging was what Janet had discovered about Mitch's travel. His Palm Springs trip was booked as a strategic planning retreat for one, but when I looked at the hotel reservation details. She paused, clearly uncomfortable. The room was upgraded to a suite with 2 beds. And I have screenshots of the booking confirmations. I felt my pulse quicken. This was it, the tangible proof that their relationship had crossed professional boundaries and involved deception of company resources. "Janet, have you told anyone else about this?" I asked carefully. "No, and I'm scared, Callie. What if they trace it back to me? I could lose my job." Her voice trembled slightly. I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing. The truth matters, and I'll make sure you're protected." But I knew that Janet's information alone wouldn't be enough. I needed to present it in a way that would force action. 2 weeks later, the opportunity I'd been waiting for finally arrived. Delia Hartley, our board chair, announced a routine compliance audit scheduled for the following month. These audits happened annually, examining everything from financial practices to personnel policies. Perfect timing, perfect cover. I spent 3 days crafting what I privately called the package, a comprehensive, meticulously documented report that laid out every piece of evidence I'd gathered. I structured it not as an accusation, but as a formal inquiry into potential policy violations that had come to my attention during routine work. The genius was in the presentation. I didn't lead with allegations of misconduct. Instead, I began with a series of factual observations about unusual personnel decisions and travel irregularities, then methodically connected them to specific sections of our corporate conduct policy. I documented the timeline. Tinsley's hire, the accelerated promotion process, the coincidental travel to Palm Springs, the expense report discrepancies, and the pattern of meetings that excluded relevant stakeholders. I included Janet's screenshots of the hotel arrangements and VPN logs showing shared access from the same location. Most importantly, I framed everything in terms of corporate governance and fiduciary responsibility. This wasn't personal revenge. This was about maintaining the integrity of our promotional processes and ensuring compliance with established policies. The final touch was my cover letter, addressed to Delia Hartley personally, respectfully requesting guidance on how to proceed with information that had come to my attention through normal business operations. I submitted it on a Thursday evening, marked, confidential, board chair eyes only. Have you ever felt time move differently when you're waiting for something that could change your entire life? The 3 weeks following my submission to Delia Hartley were the longest of my career. Every day, I went to work wondering if today would be the day everything exploded. Mitch and Tinsley continued their usual routines, seemingly oblivious to the investigation quietly unfolding around them. They attended meetings, gave presentations, and maintained their professional facades while I watched like a hawk for any signs that they knew their world was about to crumble. The hardest part was maintaining my own facade. Colleagues asked about my plans, whether I was looking for other opportunities, how I was handling the disappointment of not getting promoted. I smiled and gave diplomatic answers while internally counting down to what I hoped would be their reckoning. During this period, I noticed small changes in office dynamics. Delia had started attending more executive meetings than usual. There were whispered conversations between HR Director Patricia Wells and company attorney James Crawford. Most telling of all, I spotted an unfamiliar woman in a business suit meeting privately with Delia, someone I later learned was from our external legal firm. The investigation was happening, but it was happening quietly, professionally, the way these things should be handled. I began to allow myself to hope that justice might actually prevail. But nothing prepared me for how dramatically everything would change on that Monday morning in November. Quick reminder to subscribe and share this story if you want to see justice served, because what happens next will shock you. Monday, November 15th started like any other day, except for one small detail that only I seemed to notice. Tinsley looked nervous. For someone who usually strutted through the office like she owned it, her movements seemed careful, almost hesitant. Around 10 a.m., Mitch received a call that made his face go pale. I watched from my desk as he stepped into the hallway, phone pressed tightly to his ear, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something that looked suspiciously like panic. By lunch, both of them had separately canceled their afternoon meetings. Mitch claimed he had an urgent client call, while Tinsley cited a strategic planning emergency. But I noticed they didn't leave together, and neither seemed to be heading toward any client meetings. They hadn't even looked at each other that day, either being careful or crumbling. The real confirmation that something was happening came from Patricia Wells. As HR director, Patricia and I had worked together on numerous projects over the years. She trusted my discretion and occasionally shared information that helped me navigate office politics. That afternoon, she appeared at my desk with an unusual request. "Callie, I need you to compile a comprehensive list of all personnel decisions made in the last 6 months, she said quietly. Include promotion timelines, approval processes, and any deviations from standard procedures." I kept my expression neutral, but my heart was racing. Of course. Should I prioritize any particular department or level? Focus on executive-level decisions, she replied. And Callie? This needs to be completely confidential until further notice. As she walked away, I allowed myself a small smile. The wheels of corporate justice were finally turning. Tuesday brought more obvious signs that the walls were closing in. Mitch spent most of the morning in his office with the door closed. Highly unusual for someone who prided himself on maintaining an open-door policy. Tinsley, meanwhile, seemed to be avoiding the executive floor entirely, spending her time in conference rooms with junior staff members who looked confused about why the VP was suddenly micromanaging their routine tasks. The most telling moment came during the weekly executive briefing. These meetings typically ran for exactly 1 hour, covering departmental updates and strategic priorities. Today's meeting lasted 3 hours, and I could see through the conference room's glass walls that the discussion was intense. Delia Hartley dominated most of the conversation, consulting frequently with a thick folder that I suspected contained my carefully compiled evidence. James Crawford, our attorney, was present throughout, another deviation from normal procedure. When the meeting finally ended, I watched the participants' faces as they filed out. Some looked confused, others appeared concerned, and a few seemed carefully neutral. But Mitch and Tinsley? They looked like they'd seen their careers flash before their eyes. That evening, as I was preparing to leave, Patricia approached me again. "Callie, I need another favor," she said, her voice even more cautious than before. "Can you provide documentation of the normal timeline for senior-level promotions? Historical data showing typical vetting processes, approval requirements, the T sort of thing. How far back should I go?" I asked. 5 years should be sufficient. And Callie? Include specific examples of positions similar to the VP of Strategy role. I nodded, understanding exactly what she was really asking for, evidence that Tinsley's promotion had been processed with unprecedented speed and minimal oversight. Wednesday morning brought a development that sent shockwaves through the executive floor. 2 investigators from our external legal firm had set up temporary offices and were conducting individual interviews with key personnel. Their badges read Beaumont and Dunn LLP, our legal consultants for high-stakes compliance cases. I received my interview request at 11 a.m., scheduled for Friday afternoon. The official reason was routine compliance verification, but everyone knew this was serious. In a company like Brantford and Hillman, external investigators only appeared when internal processes had failed or when potential legal exposure was significant. Throughout the day, I watched colleagues being called for interviews. The pattern was telling. They were focusing on people who'd been involved in recent hiring and promotion decisions, travel approvals, and policy compliance oversight. Janet Osborne emerged from her interview looking relieved but worried. During our brief conversation by the coffee machine, she confirmed what I'd suspected. They asked very specific questions about travel booking procedures and expense report approvals, she whispered. They knew details I didn't expect them to know. By Thursday, the atmosphere in the office had become noticeably tense. Mitch and Tinsley were still maintaining their normal schedules, but their interactions had changed. The casual intimacy I'd observed before was replaced by careful professionalism, the kind that screamed, "We're being watched." The most significant development came Thursday afternoon when I noticed security personnel removing boxes from Mitch's office. When I casually asked the security guard what was happening, he simply said they were securing documents for review. That evening, I prepared meticulously for my Friday interview, organizing my thoughts and evidence in a way that would be helpful to the investigation without appearing vindictive or personally motivated. Friday's interview took place in Conference Room C, a windowless space that felt more like an interrogation chamber than a corporate meeting room. The 2 investigators, Linda Foster and Robert Kingston, were professional but thorough. MS. "Morgan," Linda Foster began, "we understand you've been with Brantford and Hillman for 14 years. In that time, have you observed any irregularities in our promotion processes? I took a breath and began my carefully prepared response. I walked them through my observations chronologically, starting with Tinsley's unusual hiring process and ending with the accelerated promotion that defied established protocols. Can you elaborate on your knowledge of corporate conduct policies? Robert Kingston asked. This was my moment. I explained my role in drafting Section 9 of the conduct policy, the specific language about undisclosed relationships affecting career advancement, and my concerns about whether current leadership decisions aligned with established guidelines. They asked about the Palm Springs travel, the expense reports Janet had discovered, and the pattern of private meetings between Mitch and Tinsley. I provided factual information without speculation, letting the evidence speak for itself. The final question caught me off guard. Ms. Morgan, do you believe you should have received the VP of Strategy promotion? I paused, choosing my words carefully. I believe promotions should be based on merit, experience, and adherence to established processes. If those criteria were properly applied, I'm confident in my qualifications. The interview lasted 2 hours. As I left, I felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. The truth was finally out there, but now I had to wait for the consequences. The following Monday, everything changed. I arrived at work to find the executive floor buzzing with unusual activity. By 9 a.m., the rumors started spreading. Mitch Langford and Tinsley Ray had both been placed on administrative leave pending investigation completion. The official announcement came from Delia Hartley at 10 a.m., delivered via company-wide email with carefully neutral language about ensuring compliance with corporate governance standards and maintaining the integrity of our promotional processes. But the real story was in what wasn't said. 2 senior executives don't get suspended simultaneously unless the evidence against them is overwhelming. My phone started ringing immediately. Colleagues wanted details, gossip, confirmation of rumors. I maintained strict professionalism, redirecting conversations toward work priorities and avoiding speculation about ongoing investigations. The most challenging call came from Jerome Blackwell, my former boss who delivered the crushing news about my missed promotion. Callie, I owe you an explanation, he said, his voice heavy with regret. The board pressured me to support Tinsley's promotion. They said it was about optics and modernizing our leadership profile. I should have fought harder for you. His apology felt hollow after everything I'd endured, but I appreciated his honesty. Part of me wanted to scream, but I'd already used that energy on justice. Jerome, the truth has a way of surfacing eventually. I trust the investigation will reach the right conclusions. What I didn't tell him was that I was about to face my own challenges. Being the whistleblower in a corporate scandal isn't always the heroic journey people imagine. The next 2 weeks tested every ounce of resilience I'd built over 14 years. While most colleagues were supportive, a vocal minority viewed me with suspicion. Some whispered that I was a vengeful employee who couldn't accept professional disappointment. Others suggested I'd fabricated evidence to destroy careers out of spite. The worst moment came during a department meeting when Brad Fletcher, a mid-level manager who'd always resented my success, made a pointed comment about people who can't handle competition professionally. I responded calmly, Brad, I've always believed that competition should be based on merit and conducted within ethical boundaries. I'm sure you agree with that principle. The room fell silent, but my message was clear. I wouldn't be intimidated or shamed for standing up for what was right. Patricia Wells provided unofficial updates that kept me sane during this period. The investigation had uncovered evidence even more damaging than what I'd provided: financial irregularities, policy violations, and a pattern of behavior that went beyond a single inappropriate relationship. Callie, you did this company a service, she told me privately. What they were doing wasn't just wrong, it was potentially illegal. The board is grateful someone had the courage to speak up. Still, the uncertainty was killing me. My career at Brantford and Hillman felt permanently damaged, regardless of whether I'd been vindicated. I started updating my resume and quietly reaching out to professional contacts about opportunities elsewhere. That's when the first unexpected phone call arrived. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This story is about to take a turn that nobody saw coming. Ms. Morgan? This is Elizabeth Hartwell from Clark and Mendez. We've heard about your situation at Branford and Hillman, and we'd like to discuss a potential opportunity with you. Clark and Mendez was a Fortune 200 consulting firm with an impeccable reputation for ethical leadership and operational excellence. Elizabeth Hartwell was their chief operating officer, someone whose name commanded respect throughout our industry. We're establishing a new strategic operations division, she continued, and we need someone with both the technical expertise and the ethical backbone to lead it. Your reputation for integrity, combined with your operational track record, makes you an ideal candidate. The position she described was essentially what I'd been promised at Branford and Hillman, but with broader scope, better compensation, and, most importantly, leadership that valued ethical behavior over political maneuvering. 2 days later, I received a similar call from Peterson and Associates, another prestigious firm that had somehow learned about my situation. Then came an inquiry from Northbridge Industries, followed by interest from Strategic Solutions Group. Word was spreading through professional networks about the executive who'd stood up to corruption and paid the price. But instead of career suicide, my principled stand was becoming a professional asset. The irony wasn't lost on me. By trying to destroy my career, Mitch and Tinsley had actually opened doors I'd never imagined possible. By the end of the week, I had 4 concrete job offers, each representing a significant step up from my current position. For the first time in months, I felt hope returning. But the best news was yet to come. On December 3rd, exactly 6 weeks after I'd submitted my evidence to Delia Hartley, the investigation concluded. The results were more comprehensive than I'd dared hope. Mitch Langford was terminated for cause, forfeiting his severance package and benefits. The investigation had uncovered not just the relationship with Tinsley, but a pattern of favoritism that had affected multiple personnel decisions over the past year. Tinsley Ray's termination was equally decisive. Beyond the obvious ethical violations, investigators discovered that she'd misrepresented her qualifications during the hiring process and had submitted fraudulent expense reports totaling over $12,000. Most satisfying of all, the investigation prompted a comprehensive review of recent promotional decisions. 3 other questionable appointments were overturned, and new protocols were established to prevent similar abuse in the future. Delia Hartley called me personally to deliver the news. Callie, I want you to know that your courage in bringing this to our attention has strengthened this entire organization. You've reminded us all why integrity matters. I accepted the position at Clark and Mendez as Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations, leading a team of 15 brilliant professionals in transforming how Fortune 500 companies approach operational efficiency. My salary increased by 60%, but more importantly, I work for leaders who value substance over style, merit over politics. Tinsley? Last I heard, she was teaching personal branding courses online, spinning her termination as a strategic pivot toward entrepreneurship. Mitch? He disappeared from our industry entirely. And me? I didn't just survive their betrayal, I used it as a launching pad to achieve more than I'd ever thought possible. Sometimes the best revenge isn't personal vengeance. It's professional excellence. If this story inspired you to stand up for what's right, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps me share more stories about courage, integrity, and the power of never giving up. Remember, the truth always wins in the end, you just have to be brave enough to fight for it.